If opportunity out there in the world is represented by whales and sharks, and you're a small fish with a small venture, a startup that you just started, how do you actually take on the whales or the sharks that would totally just with one bite take you out? You have to build a school of piranha. That is, my venture is one piranha, your venture is another piranha, and let's go get 30 or 40 of our other ventures that we can actually coordinate with. By building a school of piranha, there's not one whale or shark that can deal with what we can unleash on them. This is the, metaphorically speaking, the power of the networked entrepreneurial economy. First off, you might say, Kevin, who cares? Why does this matter? The world is shifting. There's uncertainty is the new norm, and everyone's looking for certainty. You know, as the Canadian Prime Minister just recently said, we're at a rupture in the history of what's happening in the world. He just did this at Davos just a few weeks ago. Uncertainty. We can't depend on this. We can't depend on the historic rules-based order. We can't depend on this trading partner or that trading partner. So we have to operate in that reality. You as an entrepreneur, me as an entrepreneur, we have to do the same thing. Markets, jobs, governments, institutions are all under strain. The old playbooks don't explain what's happening anymore, and we have to figure out how we can solve this. How can we actually figure out, how can we learn fast enough to take on the situation that's happening? It's not a simple answer. Volatility is now permanent. Volatility is exactly what we're having to operate in. Uncertainty is exactly what we have to operate in. Disruption is what we have to operate in. What are we going to do about it? Well, so the first thing is we inherited a false choice. Every time that we've been told there's either capitalism or socialism, and what's happening, opportunities for you to plug in are getting hidden behind these two concepts. When we engage in a world of uncertainty, we can't just identify with one or another and think that we're going to find an answer. There's what we would call an emergent set of properties. If you believe what Mark Carney actually said about the rupture of the market, then what we need to look for is what's emergent underneath that. Capitalism told us, innovate fast, compete with everyone, but accept inequality, and you're probably going to have to burn yourself out. Socialism said, protect the people, but slow down innovation, and it's going to cost a lot. Neither one of those concepts really works, especially in the age of uncertainty. I don't want to argue about this binary choice. What I want to propose to you is that us as entrepreneurs, there is a way of actually coordinating together. What if it's adaptability versus rigidity? And you know, am I rigidly going to operate in a system that's burning me out? Am I going to just throw money in a social collective and think that that's going to be the answer? The idea is we need to get to learning systems versus brittle systems. The systems that we have, whether on this side or this side of the political spectrum, they're brittle. They're based on history. It's a false choice. You heard me talk about in a previous video about tables versus towers. Towers where there's power for the few over the masses. And we see this emerging on the left and on the right. So the idea now also is care versus ego. Is it actually that we can build an economy that cares and opens up to each other? There's a guy named John Nash that talked about the non-cooperative equilibrium among individuals. And what he said was, when the individual goes out alone and fights, they might create a better outcome or a worse outcome. But when he or she coordinates with a group of people, the highest possibility of output comes. It's a really simple concept, but a lot of times this knowledge hasn't come to us from the standpoint of how we think about our political economic systems. If I only focus on my own needs and I don't think about you or anyone else here, yes, I might or might not produce an outcome, but the best outcome for everyone involved, and more than likely the highest outcome for yourself as well, is when we coordinate not just for ourselves, but take care of self and take care of the group that we're operating within. That is the highest outcome. The entrepreneurs are society's research and development. We are the R&D behind society. We're the ones that are going to figure this out as well. Entrepreneurs decide how societies are going to learn. We coordinate and we figure out things. We figure out the new patterns of behavior before anyone else out there. Scientists and academics think about it, but we put it into practice. We are where the rubber meets the road about how we work together and figure this out. So failure is not a bug in this. It's also the cost of delivery. And part of what we can do is by you and I learning with each other, alongside with each other, we can drive the cost of failure down because we're learning back and forth really quickly with each other. Yet the problem is that as entrepreneurs, most of us are operating in the context of punishing failure versus designing for it. You're probably working on your startup somewhere over here, isolated and alone, others over here, isolated and alone, not taking advantage of each other, not taking advantage of insight, and not creating the inherent safety net that we all need while we're trying to figure out how to build the new technology that solves all these problems that we keep on referring to. The truth is, everyone here has some measure of failure, whether you're at the beginning of your entrepreneurial career or you're 30 years in like me. Part of what we have is when we share our insight back and forth, we can actually really drive new results. I have one of the things that I absolutely enjoy doing is sparing entrepreneurs from making the same mistakes that I made. Yes, there's still going to be failure, but let's work on it. So when entrepreneurs fail, we waste talent. Experience is discarded. Part of what happens is, risk becomes personal instead of systemic. When we start realizing for the amount of uncertainty that's coming, instead of being victims to it, let's design a system where we're going to work together to take on that. Because that way, if you know that I have your back and you have my back, when we take the risk, we'll have a better chance of recovery. How do we actually acquire that new knowledge and actually take advantage of it and work together? The only way that we can respond faster is these knowledge flows on sharing insight back and forth. Because innovation thrives when the risk is shared. And part of the way of distributing that risk is working back and forth about how can we design to share the risk, share the failure as part of the system design. The beautiful thing in the open source world is we see this happening with open source software developers. They'll share just a little bit of risk and then they contribute code back in because it builds the base commons, the code itself in that case, so that people can take value of their collective input. That same concept can actually be used together when we look at building solutions that care about the world and ventures that take on those needs. So we can still have places where individual effort still has an impact, but the downside needs to be collective. We need to figure out how we can operate as a collective so that there's a reason that an individual would take a risk. Otherwise, we're going to have people drop out of the economy, just move to a little beach town in Mexico and decide that they're going to unplug. Now, every once in a while, yes, there's a reason that I want to go to that little beach town in Mexico to unplug. But from a standpoint of building the future that we want, part of what we can do is we can take the sting out of that downside risk and still have time to go to the beach in Mexico to enjoy life. So I want to actually introduce this new thesis, the networked economy for entrepreneurship, like this network concept. What I am describing is an operating system that at some point will come up to the level of the economy and replace what we have happening right now. This is a synthesis at the entrepreneurial layer. What I mean by that is, one of the things I love about entrepreneurs is we all express agency. That is, I'm capable of doing something, and so I'm going to take action. We need that same entrepreneurial spirit. Part of what we want to do is we want to take advantage of that agency, the individual's capacity to take action. That is exceptionally important for building the world we want to have. Individual initiative and collective resilience really creates a different animal. We want the individual to be expressing agency as an entrepreneur. And then we want to have the connection points back in. It's going to take even more people engaging to drive and take risk to drive that forward to really solve the problems that are happening right now. The existing system isn't going to do it. So let's do something about this. So what we keep from capitalism is we don't throw markets away. The capital flows to opportunity. I think that we still want investors. We still want investors that are going to involve themselves in opportunities that drive things forward. We want to have incentives that reward execution. That is, we want to have, we want to make sure that the individual that took that risk has a way of really succeeding and benefiting from the risk that he or she took. Competition plays a part. And Adam Smith was right when he talked about, competition drives, everything forward. There is an inherent good in that. It's just not the place to stop. The other side is what we can take from socialism. We stop treating people as disposable. Humans have inherent worth. Failure is expected. It shouldn't be punished. Talent is a shared asset. You have insight. I have insight. We have a whole group of us that have insight. We need to figure out how to surface that insight so that we can work together. And then safety nets enable smarter risk taking. That is by really coordinating together so that when there is a failure, it's caught, immediately engaged. The main thing is we have this like many small piranhas, the concept that I told you about at the very beginning of this video. The future isn't just one big shark. We want to be expressing our individual agency and being able to like drive things forward. If you really want to build heaven on earth, one of the ways you do it is you don't wait on the corporations to magically say, oh, we're going to do this. No, you get these thousands of small adaptive ventures that are working with each other. They're highly coordinated. They're loosely coupled, but highly coordinated, working together. And then they form relationships, they dissolve things, they recombinize things, just like you see happening in open source software, although this is happening in business. And there's coordination with hierarchy. It's not that we're all working for someone else way above us. Those type of structures, when we hear it happening at corporations, no, we're going to coordinate, we'll have a healthier set of companies, and we'll be more efficient with the capital that we're using to create the results we want. That's the way this works. Part of what we want to drive is from ideology to infrastructure. I'm talking about new concepts. The new concept, the first one that we're going to actually draw upon is this whole idea of that care is inherent to how we look at it. Care for each other, care for the people that we're solving the problems that are underneath the ventures and technologies that we're building. It only works if it's built into the system. The idea is like there's going to be rules, not a rhetoric. And we want to be very honest and open about what we see is possible. There's got to be protocols, not just promises. That is, protocols about how do we engage, how do we coordinate with each other, what we're up to. Then most importantly, out of this whole set of concepts that I think is a really new concept to enter into the conversations on entrepreneurial ventures is that care is an inherent infrastructure among us. How we take care of each other, how we concern ourselves with each other's venture. In my previous video, I talked about empathy is not a liability as it's been talked about by certain corporatists out there. Care is infrastructure about how we work with each other. That's a really critical part because then failure becomes compost. One venture fails for whatever reason, but we can immediately integrate that knowledge into the collective, the community of practice. And then through that, also bring those individuals back in and reabsorb them into other ventures quickly. The jobs that have been lost this year, they're not coming back, guys. So what do we do to actually pick all these people up and integrate them in? This is the way we deal with it. That failure of all these corporations that are just dumping tens of thousands of people, we need to come up with a different way of doing that. Entrepreneurial ventures are the way to start, but then these networked entrepreneurial bridges working together is how we can actually really take this to scale. So reputation records learning, not shame. We need to start engendering this deeper psychology of health among us as entrepreneurs. It's been the dirty little secrets, still little secrets, don't look over here, and now it needs to surface. It needs to be identified. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Let's get that sort of stuff out. Let's be in the conversation with each other. Reputation should be, okay, this is what I learned, versus shaming that person and putting him in the back. And then builders re-enter stronger. That's what we want to build. We want to build this. We want to build it to scale. We've got it here in Austin. I have it, but I'd like to share it with you because through this, we can take on these big issues and tear into them. That is the most important thing. That's why care is at the center of all this, because we can rebuild and come out stronger. Because this is why it matters now. Automation is accelerating displacement. AI is going to take a lot more jobs. There's a lot of corporations that are just cutting people because they want to raise profits even more too. AI is part of the problem. There's corporate incentives that are driving, cash to certain people, but not to the general people. That's creating an issue, part of what we as entrepreneurs that have the solutions need to do is go to them and show how actually can we do it where we're spending less money, but getting more of a true output. We can't afford to waste entrepreneurs and the builders. We can't afford to like take this valuable talent that takes autonomy and takes agency and drives things forward, the brilliant minds that are taking this risk. We can't just have them fall by the wayside and somehow act like that's acceptable. If you want the world to change, you need to figure out how not only to get better as an entrepreneur yourself, but also how to pick up that individual that tried and failed. And for the people who are sitting by the sidelines, because they have no idea, they're overwhelmed by what's happening in the world. We need to pick them up too. We need to get them engaged. This is the work of Tech Ranch. This isn't theory for us. This has been one of the beautiful gifts of my life is this idea. The secret is tables. We build tables, not towers. We want to get people at the table together because they can move fast. They don't have to have some, government or other patriarchal kind of solution, looking down and taking care of all the little people. No, that's bullshit. That does not work. Let's get rid of that type of system. Let's figure out how we can get people at the table together. We designed networks of care to make this happen. What I'm talking about is already unleashed. Last 10 years, 23 different countries. I can tell you that we already see this happening. It's now time to take it to a different level. And what we do is we at Tech Ranch help ecosystems learn faster. I learned this as a entrepreneurial ecosystem builder here in Austin. And then I built a bunch of startups and I helped a bunch of other people build startups. But the truth is, I think the most powerful thing I learned was not about any specific company, but the underlying model that holds these together that then gives us a chance to take it to scale. That's our work. It's been my passion. I want to take that same thing and empower many more entrepreneurs. That's our work at Tech Ranch. I got a question for you. What kind of system do you want to live in? Are you happy with the reality that's out there right now? I get that many of you want to take action. Part of what I want to point to is how to plug into a community of practice, a network group of people who designed together that we solve these type of problems at scale together. We get the economic development people involved and things like that, but we take the initiative of what's happening right now and move forward. If you're happy with the system right now, okay, don't do anything. Just, do what you're doing. But what I really think the challenge, and I think the call from most of the people that I interact with is, we need to figure out how to change what's happening and do something different. So this is an invitation. This is a direction. I want to find the handful of individuals, and I think it's going to be a larger number than I'm initially thinking, but to actually figure out how do we design this at the next scale. We've got the right elements started. We've got the right pieces started. We're starting to get different ecosystems to plug in around this model, not just Tech Ranch's historical work, but there are a handful of community leaders, politicians, governmental leaders around the world that are recognizing the system has ruptured. And what was happening yesterday is not going to work going forward. So let's do something about it. You're part of this. This only works if we build it together. This is the moment. This is our moment to work together. It's my honor to be here with you and to work with you. Let's start organizing in this way. Let's go change the world for the better together. Thank you for your time today.